TV must be a circle. Ow! Ow! Ow!
Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Megan Tennant, and today we are talking about Dan Harmon's Story Circle, which is a narrative structure I don't actually use, and I'll tell you why.
Sometimes I'm like a whisper in a riot, but I grow stronger, keep
So if you're a pantser, you'll probably find Dan Harmon's Story Circle, as well as other narrative structures, pretty pointless.
Ow! Ow! Ow!
But as an outliner, I cannot recommend narrative structures enough. I've covered other narrative structures in the past, so I'll put those in a playlist and link them in the description, but today it's Dan Harmon's turn.
A circle is a daydream.
So let's talk background. So Dan Harmon is a writer, and you're probably most familiar with his work on Community, Rick and Morty, and Harmonquest, which is sort of a D&D improv show that gets animated later. Much like Blake Snyder, as I covered in my Save the Cat video, Dan Harmon was familiar with the hero's journey, but felt like it needed a little bit of tweaking. He began developing Story Circle in the 90s when he was stuck while writing a screenplay. In an interview with Wired, he says, "I was thinking there must be some symmetry to this, some simplicity." And so he took the hero's journey, and in search of the simplicity aspect, he distilled it down into only 8 steps. And in search of the symmetry aspect, he popped those 8 steps into a circle. He also calls the circles embryos because they contain everything that you need for a satisfying story, so that's led to some people calling this Plot Embryo instead of Story Circle. So Dan Harmon uses this bad boy everywhere, from episodes of the $45 million a year Community to his silly homegrown web shorts.
Who wants to see that?
17 million people.
So then, what does this circle look like? Let's talk Story Circle basics. So you start off with a circle. I know, what a plot twist. And you draw a line straight down the middle, vertical style. Now in the first half, you're gonna have the portion of your story where your character is ignorant, in denial, dishonest, or illusioned. On the other side, your character will be enlightened, disillusioned, honest, and or out of denial. So this particular line is focused on the internal changes in your character. Now take a circle and draw a line horizontally, splitting it into 2 halves again. These 2 halves are gonna be focused on the external things your character is gonna face. So the top half is the character's familiar world, life, order, consciousness, solid ground. And the bottom half is the unfamiliar world, the extraordinary world, death, chaos, unconsciousness, and the depths. Think of it like your character diving into water. They dive in dry and from a familiar place, they emerge wet but again in a familiar place. So when you combine the two, you're gonna have a circle divided into 4 pieces. And at each of these lines, each of these intersections, those are gonna be where you're gonna find the most change and thus the most narrative focus. Crossing the lower vertical line is gonna be where your character confronts themselves and their own internal beliefs. That's gonna be where they have their major mental shift. So this is generally a time of self-reflection and realization. Crossing the horizontal line, on the other hand, is where we see the character facing external conflicts, generally enemies. Often they lose when they're crossing the first threshold, and then they win when they're crossing the second one, because when they're crossing the second one, they've now had that internal change and that realization, which gives them the tools that they need to then beat the enemy in that second crossing. Now let's talk Story Circle specifics. So nestled within those 4 slices, we have 8 beats, and they are as follows. Number 1, a character is in a zone of comfort or familiarity. Number 2, they desire something. Number 3, they enter an unfamiliar situation. Number 4, they adapt to the situation. Number 5, they get that which they desired. Number 6, they pay a heavy price for it. Number 7, they return to their familiar situation. And number 8, they have changed as a result of their journey. And because Dan Harmon was searching for simplicity, he further broke this down into single words, which is the most simple story structure I have basically ever seen, and it's 8 steps, 1 word each. So if you're looking for something that's just super quick to look at to try to orient yourself, this is probably a pretty good option. So we have step 1, you. Step 2, need. Step 3, go. Step 4, search. Step 5, find. Step 6, take. Step 7, return, and step 8, change. Now, a really interesting thing about this circle that I didn't realize until I started researching this video is symmetry. See, Dan didn't just slap these bad boys into a circle and call it symmetrical. There is actually symmetry to these components. And I'm not just talking about the two halves on the vertical side or on the horizontal side, but rather the symmetry between each slice and its opposite slice. For example, a character in a zone of familiarity is across from they get that which they wanted. These are two upbeats in the story. This is the post-want and the after-want. Then we have they desire something paired with they pay a heavy price for it, which is beautifully symmetrical but in a different way. Rather than these kind of matching, these balance each other out because they're on different extremes. And they do both completely surround the character's want and need, but on opposite sides where one is light and one is heavy. Because generally in the first one they have a want, and then in the next one they've kind of realized their need. If you want more on want and need in characters, I covered a video on it. I think it came out pretty good. I'll link it in the description. Then we have they enter an unfamiliar situation and they return to their familiar situation, which are points in the story where we truly see the separation between worlds. And these two beats allow us to see the character interacting with both their extraordinary world and their ordinary world in both a post-change and a pre-change state. And finally, we have they adapt to the situation and they have changed as a result, which are both stages where the character reaches sort of a point of homeostasis and becomes familiar with their environment. The beauty of this narrative structure is truly the symmetry of it, the way that we have the differing halves, but also the way each slice pairs so well with its counterpart on the opposite side, as well as each slice pairing well with the slices beside it. Everything just flows so well together. There's also a really nice repetitive nature to it because it is a circle. You come full circle in the end, and the character can then start the circle again with differences in each slice. So they enter a different unfamiliar world, and they have a different want, and they continue on, and the character can keep cycling. So in things like TV shows, which is what Dan Harmon writes for the most part, this is what you see in character arcs. Generally, each episode they have kind of a mini character arc. They go around the circle multiple times, but each time the circle's different. Now, it should be noted that not all of these slices should get the same time dedication. For example, the first two and the last two tend to be shorter and bleed into each other a lot, and the bulk of your story in most cases will take place in the bottom half. So don't feel like this is representative of on-page time, and that's true of basically every narrative structure out there. So despite my set-in-stone decision to stick with the hero's journey for my own personal writing endeavors, I cannot deny that there is a beauty to this story method. What it comes down to is that its symmetry has rhythm and balance that the human mind just craves, because we evolved to love recognizing patterns. It's part of the problem-solving abilities that set us apart from most other mammals. And symmetrical things let us easily pick out patterns and connect things into a whole that feels bigger than the sum of its parts. And if you can impart that symmetry and balance into your story by using this structure, your audience will connect to it on a deeper level because, again, the human mind craves that symmetry. It feeds into the sense of duality that surrounds us our entire lives. You have life and death, good and evil, consciousness and unconsciousness, order and chaos. The other truly interesting thing is that this circle doesn't have to be applied just to your main plot and your main character, but it can also be applied to subplots, other characters. One of the things a lot of people have mentioned that they love about Aletheia is how real the characters feel and how the characters still exist off page. They each have their own character arcs going on, and although we don't see the entirety of their arcs because I don't have the time to dedicate to that, we see enough glimpses that we know they're there. And that makes the story feel a lot more real. So a great way to achieve this is to give all of your main characters story circles. Of course, you want to focus mainly on your protagonist, and the other circles are going to be sparse and they're going to be less detailed because you can't put as much time into them. And of course, some of those circles will skip steps, and they're not going to all start at the same time, and they're not going to all transpire at the same speeds. But if you stop for half a second to consider what these circles would look like for the rest of your main cast, and maybe even your side side characters, you'll start thinking about these sort of things and you'll naturally start adding in little details that will end up making them feel so much more real. Remember, each of your characters is the protagonist in their own story. I'll be honest with you, when I started scripting this video, I planned on saying that the hero's journey and all of its variations could run circles around Dan Harmon's Plot Embryo. In fact, that exact line existed in this portion of the script. But after discovering the symmetry that exists within the circle, I'm no longer convinced. Personally, I'm going to continue using the hero's journey because as a long-form writer, I find the additional steps and structure helpful. I'm building really large stories, so I need a big-ass structure to hold them up.
Who can build a taller tower? I think it is Dan. Who can...
But with that being said, there is a true beauty to this plot embryo method, and there are a lot of writers out there that I truly feel will mesh better with this than any of the other structures. And beyond the symmetry, I believe that one of the best parts of this plot embryo is in the simplicity of it. Whereas I like complexity in my narrative structures, there are a lot of writers out there, especially those who prefer pantsing, who really like to have more gaps in their narrative structures so they have the freedom to stretch out their wings and flex more of their creative muscles. And writers of short form fiction who try to hit all of the beats in a structure like Save the Cat or The Hero's Journey will find that that's going to stretch their story too thin. So hopefully this video helped you see if maybe you're one of the writers who will mesh well with this structure. In the past, I've covered multiple examples in the same video in which I cover the narrative structure, but this time I'm actually breaking it up. So if you want to see these principles applied to an actual story, make sure to subscribe and keep your eye out for the video that's going to be going up very soon where I'm going to break down a story and apply these different stages. So let me know in the comments, do you call this plot embryo or story circle? Because I can't decide which one I prefer. Also let me know, have you ever used this with a story? And if so, are you a long form writer or a short form writer? And that was it for this video. If you want to learn more about Save the Cat, stick around for the end cards. If you found this video helpful, make sure to drop a like. And thank you so much for watching. As always, I will see you in the next video.
Say you